Hey y'all, hi. So, as many of you already know, in the year of 2018, I did a no-buy year. Before that year, I was spending way too much money on makeup, skincare, clothing, and homewares, and buying too much of that kind of thing. So at the beginning of 2018, I completely stopped buying anything in any of those categories, and I started my YouTube channel. And I documented the entire no-buy year on YouTube. All of the videos that I filmed that year are organized chronologically in a playlist. If you want to watch through the entire no-buy year, click through and watch the playlist. I'll link it down below. At the end of the year, in December of the no-buy year, so I actually hadn't completed it, but I was very near the end of my no-buy, I filmed a video called Should You Do a No-Buy Year? And that video has performed pretty well on YouTube. It's been viewed a lot, and I think it still holds water. If you're trying to decide if you should do a no-buy year in 2022, then you should definitely watch that video in addition to this one. But lately I've realized that I want to do an update. I want to do I've been wanting to film a new video called Should You Do a No-Buy Year? Because a lot of what I learned about myself from my no-buy year, I actually learned after, like in the years since my no-buy year. And now that it's been a full 3 years since the end of my no-buy year, I feel like I have more to say on the topic and I can kind of put that original video in perspective. And that is what I'm going to be doing today. If this is your first time to my channel, then welcome. I'm glad you're here. My name is Hannah Louise Poston, and if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will subscribe. Now, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. I feel like we're really serving cool girl today. But I want to assure you, this is just my cool girl drag. I'm not really a cool girl underneath it all. I'm just me. We're all born naked, as RuPaul says, and the rest is drag, and that's what this is. Let us start with the original video, Should You Do a No-Buy Year? I never go back and watch my old videos, and you know, I watched it, or I skipped around so that I could report back on like what I think about what I said then. And you know, she's cute. I kind of wish I could go back and tell her to get a shag haircut, but it's all right. This is what I said in the original video. I went through, in order to like help viewers decide if they should do no-buy year, I went through and described the things that were realities in my life before my no-buy year that drove me to do a no-buy year. So before my no-buy year, I was spending unwisely. That's a pretty obvious one. I was spending way too much money. I had a skewed sense of worth. I think I didn't really realize this until towards the end of my no-buy year, how wrong I had been about like what was worth the amount of money that I was spending on it, especially in the context of my financial situation. Item number 3, I was afraid of my own finances. I was scared to check my bank balance, and I would spend money without knowing exactly how much money I had left. Number 4, I was buying things to experience a temporary feeling of prosperity. So I wanted to feel like I was prosperous, and even though I wasn't very prosperous, and a lot of times I was in debt because of overspending, I would buy fancy stuff because owning it tricked me into temporarily feeling prosperous. I know it's very counterintuitive, but here we are. Number 5, shopping was my main form of recreation. So embarrassing. Number 6, I didn't know what I had. Like I didn't really know how much stuff was in my closet, how much makeup I had. I couldn't remember everything. I couldn't keep it all in my mind palace. Number 7, I was always looking for something to want. Even when I didn't actively want something, I was hungry to get back into the state of wanting. I wanted to want stuff for some reason, which we'll get into later in this video. And number 8, I panicked when I wanted something like a piece of makeup or an item of clothing and it was sold out or otherwise unavailable. So those are the 8 things that I put forward in that video as reasons that I did a no-buy year and reasons that you might want to do a no-buy year. I'm not going to elaborate on that list right now for 2 reasons. One, I feel like it's pretty straightforward and you might have gotten all you need to get just by hearing me list those 8 things off right now. 2, the other video exists, and in that video, all that I do is go through that list and elaborate on it. So again, I'll link it down below, and I do think that that list can definitely help you decide if you want to do a no-buy year. What I want to talk about in this video is the thing that in my current state, looking back, in my memory and in my mind, is the most important concrete behavioral change that I saw in myself as a result of my no-buy year. now that I have the distance that I have, and now that I kind of see the person that I am becoming in the wake of my no-buy year. The no-buy year, going through it and everything that it changed in me, it took the desperation out of shopping. Before my no-buy year, when I wanted something, when I wanted to buy something, I needed it with this kind of desperation, this sort of like gut-wrenching, almost sick feeling. It felt like the need for the thing was rooted in my very soul, like in my sense of self, in my identity, in the very fundamental, like the bedrock of myself and whether or not I was going to be okay. And that's because it was. The need for things, the desperate seeking of stuff, it was rooted in a place that had to do with my identity, my sense of self, and you could even say my soul. I lived in this state before my no-buy year, always wanting a thing and always feeling like the stakes were very high because without it, I would not be myself and I would not be happy. And in retrospect, I think that this condition was by design. I think that many of you are in this condition. In fact, I know that you are because I get your messages, your comments, your emails, your DMs. I think many of you are currently in that state of being, and I think that it's by design. I think that the kind of capitalism in which we are currently suspended, the patriarchal, white supremacist capitalism in which many of us live, I think that it is in the best interest of that system to keep us feeling like there's something wrong with us. This is one of its tricks. This is like maybe even its biggest trick. It makes you feel like there is something wrong with you. And then it markets all of this stuff to you, sells all of this stuff to you by making it seem like the stuff is what you need to make you whole. It makes you feel that way in 1,000 ways. I mean, the messages come from 1,000 places. They definitely come from social media, but they come from social media in a couple of ways, right? Like, I think that there's the advertising and influencer side of social media that very obviously is by design making you feel like you're not good enough because all of the images are photoshopped, impossibly skinny people with impossibly flawless skin, making you feel like your body and your skin aren't good enough. But that's like the obvious way in which the system makes us feel like we're deficient. I think that the social part of social media also makes us feel like we're not good enough. At least this is true in my experience. Seeing images of my friends and acquaintances buying big, beautiful houses, having kids, or like partying and being impossibly cool and like cooler than I'll ever be. We know from posting on social media that every post is curated and edited and polished, but it still makes you feel bad because our brains can't really comprehend that. We just see people looking like they're doing way, way better than we are, and it makes us feel bad. But the message that there's something wrong with you also comes from other places. Like, it comes from the very fabric of culture. It comes from parents sometimes and teachers, from peers. It is a message that sometimes gets taught to you literally in classrooms. It's the way people talk to each other, the way people look at each other, what's framed as being acceptable and what's framed as being unacceptable. I had incredibly loving parents and an amazing upbringing. I was so fortunate. And yet I still received all of these super mixed messages that, like, period blood is gross and body hair is gross, and yet those things were like coming out of my body all the time. And I really, really wanted beautiful clothes, but I felt bad for wanting them because I didn't want to be materialistic and I didn't really know how to make beautiful clothes part of my life because there wasn't a blueprint for that. Neither of my parents, because of who they are, and they're perfect the way they are, but neither of them saw value in the kind of fierce, hyper-stylized femininity that I have learned in adulthood is so freeing and so empowering for me and for so many people. So I wanted like long, shiny painted fingernails, but I felt like there was something wrong with me for wanting them. And I also felt like there was something wrong with my fingernails because they weren't that way. So that's adolescence, but later I grew into an adult who felt like there was something wrong with my entire life because I hadn't achieved enough, hadn't accomplished enough. It became a much broader, more all-encompassing feeling of deficiency. But it was a training that started in childhood. Messages coming from everywhere. You're not enough. There's something wrong with you. That evolved into something more fundamental, more complete, really, as I got older. Once you start noticing it, you notice that the message really does come from everywhere. So much of what is told to us filters through as being the message that there's something wrong with you. And I'm not saying that nobody has issues and no one should ever work on themselves. No, I mean, everyone has baggage and it's a good thing to work through your stuff. I'm talking about the message that you are fundamentally deficient, that you're not whole. That is a false but pervasive message. For some people, it comes through in the difference between like what your family expects you to be and to do and what you are going to be and do. Having a different path, a different trajectory. And for some people, it comes from being very different fundamentally from the societal standard, being differently abled, differently shaped, not neurotypical. For almost all of us, it's a mix because societal standards are impossible standards. There's no way to meet them all. It will just scramble your brain. And again, companies profit off of this by marketing stuff to you, selling stuff to you, by making it seem like the stuff is what will make you whole. Guess what? You're already whole. And if you don't feel like you are, if you don't recognize your wholeness, which was my problem, being deficient wasn't the problem. It was feeling like I was deficient. That was the problem. If you don't feel and recognize your wholeness, then yeah, like that is a thing to know and to work on. But buying stuff is not going to be the transformational act. And in fact, in my case, the false promise of transformation that I was always chasing by buying new stuff was the thing preventing me from transforming because I was stuck in a loop. I was stuck in a cycle that I'm actually going to briefly outline for you. And that's one of the main things that I wanted to talk about in this video. So the cycle would start with my state of being, which was me feeling bad, feeling like I wasn't good enough and there was something wrong with my life, like my life was going badly and there was something wrong with me. So I'd be feeling that way. Then I would start fixating on a piece of makeup or skincare or clothing or furniture or jewelry or shoes or something, fixating on something that on some level I thought would change my life, like fix my life. Then once I fixated on it, I would start agonizing over whether I could afford it, whether I should buy it, obsessively visualizing the place that it would occupy in my life, like how it would feel to have it or wear it or sit on it or put it on my face or how it would transform my skin. I would be just like obsessively thinking about having it in my life. And again, on some level, imagining that my life would be different. And I would spend a lot of time in this state, fixating on the thing and then fixating on how much it would change my life and whether or not I should or could buy it and when I would buy it and how I would acquire it. Because in those states of excitement, I was anticipating the thing, anticipating transformation, and I didn't feel bad when I was in that state. So I would be in that obsessive state for a long time trying to make a decision. I would eventually buy the thing, and then I would sometimes slowly and sometimes more quickly, but either way, surely, slowly but surely or quickly but surely, I would get back to my fundamental state. I would go back to feeling bad. I would go back to feeling like there was something wrong with me and that my life was going badly because makeup, skincare, clothing, furniture, jewelry, and shoes, none of that actually changes a person. And none of that could ever change or fix my life. If you want to be different, you have to change from the inside out, obviously. I mean, obviously. But even if it had been obvious to me then, even if I'd been totally clear-eyed about it, I still wouldn't have been able to break my habit because that cycle was so incredibly deeply ingrained in my life. It almost felt like it was muscle memory to go through that cycle. And as I've indicated, in that cycle of feeling bad, wanting, chasing, buying, and then feeling bad again, the wanting, chasing, buying part releases chemicals in the brain that make you feel better. They release dopamine in the brain. So I was dependent on being in that state of anticipating and obsessing over something that I was about to buy because it was the only time I felt good. So for me, taking a year-long break from shopping, stepping off of that hamster wheel of that cycle, going cold turkey, it created withdrawal in me. It made me miserable and I suffered because it created a vacuum. I didn't have my pleasure anymore and it sucked. But eventually something started to fill that vacuum. The thing that started to fill the vacuum is that I started to make the changes in my life that actually were effective in the way that buying stuff never was. I started to change myself. I started to work on myself, which, by the way, is work that I'm still doing. Like, this is a journey that I'm still on. It's my life. It's not like I just did it and it's done. But being on this journey, being someone who's actually doing that work, that is the person that I wanted to be. This is the life that I want. I feel less deficient for sure, but I also feel so much less susceptible to marketing. I'm more able to see through marketing and see that what I'm buying, even when I am buying something, I understand that what I'm buying is a sweater, not like a new life. I'm like buying a garment, not a new personality. And I wouldn't have had the space to start that process and to start actually making myself feel better from the inside out if I hadn't created the vacuum in my life by taking shopping away. So if what I've said here resonates for you, if it's feeling like maybe a little bit too close to home, a little bit too familiar, if that cycle, especially if the cycle that I just described sounds familiar to you, then yeah, a real no-buy might really help. And when I say a real no-buy, I mean a project where you truly commit to quitting shopping for a length of time and then you stick to it, you follow through even when it gets super miserable, because it definitely did for me. That misery, in my experience, is the only way to actually rewrite the chemical pathways in the brain. But it worked for me, and it can work for you. It's like, imagine there's a person who's obsessed with gardening. It's like all her life, she's just wanted to have a beautiful garden. And imagine there's a video game about gardening. And this person is so obsessed with gardening that she gets really, really into this gardening video game. She's like addicted to the gardening video game. She wakes up in the morning and the first thing she thinks about is like pushing the buttons on those controllers, and her fingers like itch to push those buttons and see like the seed on the screen go into the hole on the screen and the flower on the screen grow. Every spare minute that she has, she's like pushing those buttons and playing the gardening video game. And then even when she's not playing it, she's thinking about like what she's going to plant in the gardening video game. And meanwhile, the actual garden, like in the back of her house, her actual dirt garden is dying. She's completely obsessed with gardening, like luscious flowering plants and thick vines and seeing something small grow big, and the thought of like fruit ripening and of flowers opening makes her feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But all of that passion is going into playing the video game. That passion is actually what's driving her to be addicted to the video game. And meanwhile, her actual garden is dying. She never looks at it. She's afraid to look at it, actually. And when she goes out and looks at it, if she catches sight of it, it makes her feel so horrible and ashamed because it's dying that she just like runs back to the video game and plays it even more fervently because she's like trying to ignore the garden and not think about it, distract herself from her failure to garden. The game is immediate, it's addictive, and it's much easier than actual gardening. It's simpler and it's what she's used to. So she keeps doing it and she keeps doing it. And imagine that this goes on for years. The solution for this person is obvious, I think. She has to stop playing the video game, right? She has got to stop playing the video game because she doesn't have time. Part of why she doesn't have time to even think about what it would mean to start tending to her own garden is that she's spending all her time and her energy, and, you know, let's say the video game's very expensive all the time, and her money. But, you know, if you know anything about digital media, you know that it's hard to moderate something like a video game when you're pushing buttons like that. It's really hard to moderate. She'll probably have the best chance at success if somebody comes and takes the video game away. And that was what I did with my no-buy year. I took the video game away from myself. In this metaphor, the garden represents, you know, self-actualization, the garden in the backyard, the real one in the dirt. Shopping was my way of going through the motions of tending to myself, like going through the motions of actualizing, pushing the button, trying to create transformation because of surrounding myself with stuff. But it was all just on the outside. It didn't change me. It gave me the feeling that I was becoming the person that I wanted to be, but it was a simulation of becoming the person that I wanted to be. It wasn't actually doing anything. Just like pushing the buttons in the gardening video game wasn't actually having an effect on the actual garden. But I was so entrenched in the simulation. I was so accustomed to the simulation that I had to take it away from myself completely in order to even look at the garden, like in order to even think about doing any of the work that would actually get me closer to being the person that I wanted to be. Now, the person that I wanted to be still loves beautiful things, including fancy makeup and like expensive sweaters. In fact, I love those things genuinely so much that I have a whole YouTube channel about them. After my no-buy year, I came back to the world of shopping. You could say that I like still play the video game from time to time. You know what I mean? I dabble in the video game. I belong to a community of people who love that game, and I sometimes review that game. But I do so as a changed woman. This is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm hoping to give you perspective if you're thinking of doing a no-buy about what could be on the other side, right? It doesn't mean never enjoying beautiful things, indulging in your love of them. It doesn't mean never shopping again. I'm doing it, right? I just bought myself like 2 gorgeous and very expensive sweaters over it, like in the last quarter of the year with my budget. And I still sometimes make bad decisions, right? I don't always make perfect decisions. I still shop just like a human does. But I do it without the desperation, the feeling of desperation and dependence on shopping to distract me. And I don't do it as a distraction from the really important work of tending the garden. I have spent a lot of time since the no-buy year in the garden, like in the actual garden, in therapy, in the compassion immersion class that I took, which was totally amazing. I'll link it down below. My friend Julia Frodal still offers that class every couple of months, and I really recommend it. In conversation with my friends, with my husband, with you guys, and most importantly, in conversation with myself. I've spent much more time since my no-buy year actually tending to my transformation than I've spent shopping. I still love shopping, but for the most part, I see it for what it is. I see shopping for what it is, and I see beautiful things for exactly what they are, rather than needing them to distract me from the garden, the dying garden, the overgrown garden, the darkness in myself that I don't want to look at. And I say for the most part, I see shopping for what it is because I think that it is natural to have some like push and pull with this and to sometimes be in a slightly better place and sometimes not. For example, just at the beginning of this month, my cat was really sick and it was a really, really hard time. And on like the worst and darkest day of that, I bought my husband an amazing Christmas present that I actually probably don't regret buying him, but I probably spent like a bit more money on that than I would have if the circumstances had been different. I was in sort of a desperate place emotionally, and I know that that contributed to the decision that I made. I kind of knew it while it was happening. So it happens from time to time, right? Sometimes I play the video game too much. And also sometimes I take long breaks from playing the video game. Like I have gone a couple of months at a time, a couple of times this year, without shopping at all. But all of that is okay for me because let me tell you, I'm watering the garden the whole time and it's growing and it's bearing fruit. And I'm not tricking myself into thinking that I can get there through the screen. Like pull a piece of actual fruit that I could eat out of the screen. Or to strip away the metaphor, I know it's gotten kind of intense, I'm not tricking myself into thinking that I can shop my way to self-actualization. So that's why I'm glad that I did a no by year. And I hope that me talking about it this way will have provided you with some clarity if it's something that you're considering, even if it's clarity in the other direction. So maybe you've been thinking of doing a no by year because you want to save money, or you just really love self-improvement projects, or maybe you are a person who has always struggled to buy things for yourself, like to take care of yourself by buying things. And so weirdly, a no buy year is appealing because having a rule in place that means you can't buy things feels like it would be like the height of saintliness for you. So maybe you've thought about it, and then listening to me talk about my past behaviors and the cycle that I was stuck in, maybe you're thinking like, oh, that's not me. I don't have that problem. But if you're listening to this and you're like, that's me, if you've been playing the video game around the clock and your digital fruit is gleaming and your digital flowers are perfect, but you're terrified of what's out back in the actual dirt of your actual garden, I'll tell you, a no buy year, it could really be the thing. It could really change your life. If you're anything like I was, it's tough. It's going to be tough, but it might be what you need. And I will follow up this video with a reworked version of the other video that I filmed during that same time period back at the end of 2018, how to do a no buy year. I am preparing an updated version of that. And so if this is you, if you think it might be time, look for that video because I'll be publishing it sometime within the next couple of days, and it will be for you. And that, my friends, is it. That's the video. I, again, hope that it was helpful. And even if you just came to check up on me and see what I was saying and see how I'm feeling about my no buy year from this distance, but you don't need to do one or you haven't been thinking about doing one, I hope that you enjoyed watching the video. I really appreciate you for being here. And I really, really hope that you're taking extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.